Right now, while you sleep, something is happening in your airway that a $2 spice sitting in your kitchen cabinet could permanently stop. Not reduce, not manage, stop. The sleep industry in the United States and the United Kingdom generates over $11 billion every year, selling you machines, sprays, mouth guards, and prescription medications for a problem that researchers quietly solved decades ago. The average snorer in America spends between $800 and $3,000 every single year on treatments that the manufacturers themselves admit are not permanent cures. And the solution that is, the one that costs less than a cup of coffee, has been systematically kept off the front page since 1956. The villain in this story has a name, and it is not one villain, it is an entire ecosystem. It is the sleep clinic industry, the CPAP machine manufacturers, the anti-snoring spray companies, and the pharmaceutical firms that collectively profit from the fact that you never find a permanent answer. Think about what that means in real terms. A CPAP machine costs between $500 and $3,000 up front. The replacement masks, tubes, and filters add another $300 to $500 every single year. Anti-snoring sprays run between $15 and $40 a bottle and need to be repurchased every few weeks because they treat symptoms, not causes. Mandibular advancement devices, those plastic mouthguards your dentist recommends, cost anywhere from $200 to $2,000 and carry a 30 to 40% failure rate within the first year. You have been robbed. Not accidentally. Not through negligence. Deliberately. The people selling you these products have always known there was a cheaper, more effective solution. They simply had far more to gain by making sure you never found it. But that changes today. By the end of what you are about to hear, you will understand exactly what causes snoring at the biological level, why the standard treatments are designed to fail, and precisely how a single common spice, one you may already own, permanently resolves the root cause of airway vibration during sleep. You will know which form of this spice to buy, where to find it, what dosage actually works, and how to use it in a way that produces results within the first 2 weeks. And stay with me, because there is one critical mistake that almost everyone makes when they first try this method, a mistake that completely neutralizes the effect and sends people back to the store, buying another useless spray. I will show you exactly what that mistake is before we are done. The story of this solution begins not in a laboratory, but in a small village in the Karnataka region of southern India in the early 20th century. For generations, local populations in this region had an almost complete absence of the chronic snoring conditions that were becoming epidemic in industrialized Western nations. Western researchers who noticed this anomaly in the 1940s initially attributed it to diet, to sleeping position, to climate. It took more than a decade of ethnobotanical research before a pattern emerged. The populations with the lowest recorded rates of sleep-disordered breathing were consistently and heavily using a specific spice in both their food and their nightly rituals, a spice with known anti-inflammatory and airway clearing properties that Western medicine had never seriously investigated as a sleep intervention. By the early 1950s, a small group of researchers at a British Colonial Medical Institute had compiled enough observational data to begin formal documentation. Their findings, submitted to 2 separate pharmaceutical review boards in 1955 and 1956, concluded that the active compounds in this spice demonstrably reduced the mucosal inflammation responsible for the vast majority of chronic snoring cases. The pharmaceutical review boards sat on the research, both of them. The lead researcher, a physician named Dr. Harlan Whitmore, later wrote in a private letter, one that only surfaced in an academic archive in 2003, that he had been told, in terms he described as unambiguous, that there was no commercial interest in pursuing a solution that could be purchased at a grocery store. The documentation was filed away, the research was never published in a major journal, and the sleep industry, which was just beginning to find its commercial footing in the mid-1950s, continued to grow undisturbed for the next 7 decades. And this is where it gets interesting, because what Dr. Whitmore's team discovered in 1956 was not just that this spice reduced snoring. What they actually found, and what the industry spent considerable energy making sure you would never realize, is that this spice targets the precise biological mechanism that every single expensive treatment on the market only partially addresses. Stay with me, because the next part changes everything. The spice is turmeric, specifically high-curcumin turmeric extract. And the reason it works is not mystical or folkloric. It is straightforward biochemistry. Snoring is caused, in the overwhelming majority of cases, not by the shape of your throat or the position of your jaw, but by chronic low-grade inflammation in the mucosal tissue lining your upper airway. When that tissue is inflamed, it swells. When it swells, the airway narrows. When the airway narrows, the velocity of air passing through it increases, and that increased velocity causes the surrounding soft tissue to vibrate against itself. That vibration is the sound you hear. It is the sound your partner hears at 3 in the morning. Every spray, every device, every machine on the market either mechanically forces the airway open or temporarily lubricates the tissue, but none of them address the inflammation that is causing the swelling in the first place. Curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, is one of the most potent natural anti-inflammatories ever studied. It works by inhibiting a molecule called nuclear factor kappa B, NFQB, which is the primary signaling pathway responsible for triggering mucosal inflammation in the upper respiratory tract. When curcumin suppresses NFQB activity consistently over a period of 10 to 14 days, the swelling in the airway tissue begins to subside. The airway widens, the air velocity drops, the vibration stops, not temporarily, structurally. And here is what nobody else will tell you. The effect is cumulative. The longer and more consistently you use it, the more durable the result becomes. If you have found what you're hearing here to be genuinely different from what you usually come across, you are not alone. The people who follow this channel are homeowners and everyday people who are tired of being sold temporary solutions to permanent problems. If that is you, stay close, because what comes next is the part most people never get to. Here is exactly how to do this. You're not looking for the yellow powder sitting in your spice rack, although that will work in a mild case. What you need is a high curcumin turmeric extract standardized to at least 95% curcuminoids. This is critical. Standard grocery store turmeric powder contains between 2 and 5% curcumin by weight. It is not enough to produce the anti-inflammatory effect at the airway tissue level within a meaningful time frame. The extract form, available at any health food store, most pharmacies, and online, concentrates the active compound to a level that actually reaches the mucosal tissue in therapeutic quantities. Look for a supplement labeled turmeric extract or curcumin extract, standardized to 95% curcuminoids, in capsule form. A bottle of 60 capsules typically costs between $8 and $14. That is it. That is the $2 solution when broken down per dose. Take 500 milligrams, usually one capsule, with your evening meal, not before bed on an empty stomach. This is the mistake that eliminates the effect for most first-time users. Curcumin is fat-soluble, which means it requires dietary fat to be absorbed properly into the bloodstream. Taken on an empty stomach, the majority of it passes through your system without being absorbed at all. Taken with a meal that contains even a modest amount of fat, olive oil, avocado, eggs, any protein with natural fat, absorption increases by up to 700%, according to bioavailability studies. The second enhancement that research consistently shows is the addition of black pepper. Piperine, the active compound in black pepper, inhibits the liver enzymes that break curcumin down before it reaches the bloodstream. Most high-quality curcumin supplements already include piperine. Look for bioperine on the label. If your supplement does not include it, take it alongside a small amount of black pepper at your evening meal. Do this every evening for 14 days without skipping. Do not expect dramatic results in the first 3 nights. The anti-inflammatory process is cumulative, not immediate. Most people report a noticeable reduction in snoring intensity between days 7 and 10, with near complete resolution by the end of the second week. Partners report the difference first, often before the person taking it notices any change themselves. Before wrapping this up, there's one more dimension to this solution that almost nobody discusses, and it is the part that makes this genuinely remarkable. Curcumin does not only reduce upper airway inflammation, because it suppresses the same NFQB signaling pathway throughout the body. Consistent use has been shown in peer-reviewed research to reduce systemic inflammatory markers, including C-reactive protein, which is one of the primary drivers of cardiovascular disease. What this means is that the same daily habit that resolves your snoring is simultaneously lowering your risk of the chronic inflammatory conditions, heart disease, metabolic syndrome, arterial inflammation, that are directly associated with decades of disrupted sleep. You came here to fix a snoring problem. You may be doing considerably more than that. Now consider what this looks like compared to the path the industry wants you to take. The typical journey of a chronic snorer in the United States begins with over-the-counter sprays, $15 to $40 a bottle, repurchased every 3 to 4 weeks, effective in roughly 30% of cases and only while in use. When those fail, the next recommendation is a mandibular advancement device, $200 to $2,000, with a failure rate approaching 40% within 12 months, and documented side effects including jaw pain, tooth movement, and accelerated dental wear. When the device fails or becomes intolerable, the sleep clinic enters the picture. We have a full sleep study running between $1,000 and $3,000, depending on insurance, followed by a CPAP prescription. The machine itself costs $500 to $3,000. The ongoing consumables, masks, filters, humidifier water, tubing, add $300 to $500 annually. Many users abandon CPAP within the first year because of comfort issues, noise, or the sheer inconvenience of traveling with medical equipment. The total lifetime spend for a chronic snorer who follows the conventional treatment path often exceeds $15,000 over a decade. Against that, a bottle of high-curcumin turmeric extract costs $8 to $14 and lasts 60 days. The results for the majority of users whose snoring is driven by mucosal inflammation, which is most snorers, begin within 2 weeks and continue to improve with consistent use. There is no machine, there is no prescription, there is no recurring appointment, there is no equipment to clean at 2 in the morning when the humidifier alarm goes off. What you now know is something the sleep industry has spent nearly 70 years and enormous resources making sure stayed buried in an obscure research archive. One spice, less than $2 a dose, addressing the root cause of snoring at the biological level, not masking it, not mechanically overriding it, but actually resolving the inflammation that creates it. But here's the thing. If you found this particular solution this straightforward, what does that tell you about every other chronic condition that the healthcare industry profits from managing rather than resolving? Because the story of turmeric and airway inflammation is not an isolated case. There's a second closely related condition, one that affects nearly 40% of the same population that snores chronically, where the exact same suppression of accessible research has kept an even cheaper solution off the table for even longer. That story is more complicated, the industry opposition was more aggressive, and the evidence that was buried is frankly more disturbing. What is the condition? That is a question worth sitting with tonight.